This was the partnership that revived Yamaha after the Rossi-Lorenzo era. The alliance that took a rider written off in Moto2 and turned him into a world champion and the new face of the brand. Yet, as MotoGP edges closer to the transformational 2027 regulation reset, the atmosphere inside Iwata is anything but celebratory. It feels tense, fatigued, and increasingly combative. And that is what raises the brutal question at the center of this story. Has Yamaha reached the point where letting Fabio Quartararo go is the only way forward? For Yamaha, the Quartararo era had begun as a masterstroke. When Petronas SRT signed him for 2019, many in the paddock dismissed the move with a shrug. On paper, he seemed like damaged goods, a single Moto2 win, a patchy record, and a reputation that had cooled dramatically compared to the early Next Marquez hype of his junior days. But SRT management believed the talent from his pre-GP years still existed beneath the surface. It just needed the right environment to resurface. They were right. On a year-old M1, Quartararo delivered 6 poles and 7 podiums in 2019, dragging Marc Marquez into last-lap dogfights and immediately marking himself as Yamaha's most electrifying prospect since prime Jorge Lorenzo. By 2020, Yamaha had already chosen him as Valentino Rossi's factory successor. 3 wins in that chaotic, pandemic-torn season only reinforced that decision. And in 2021, their gamble turned into gold. Quartararo captured the World Championship at his first attempt with the factory squad, ending a 6-year title drought that stretched back to Lorenzo in 2015. Even in 2022, as the M1's weaknesses became painfully obvious against Ducati and Pecco Bagnaya's relentless rise, he dragged the championship fight all the way to the final round. Yamaha had their new superstar, and for a moment, it looked like the beginning of a long-term dynasty. Instead, 2023 to 2025 became the slow-motion unraveling of everything that partnership had built. By the end of 2025, Quartararo had not won a race since the 2022 German Grand Prix. Yamaha hadn't won one either. The once iconic inline-four M1, celebrated for its corner speed elegance, had turned into a liability in a V4-dominated era, especially as sprint-heavy weekends shifted MotoGP towards raw acceleration and top speed. And yet, buried beneath the standings, the numbers showed just how much Quartararo was still doing on a bike that no longer deserved him. He finished only 9th in the championship, but that number hides the truth. He was the only Japanese manufacturer rider inside the top 10, despite Honda managing a race win and multiple podiums. Yamaha, by contrast, secured just a single Sunday podium all season, Quartararo's 2nd place at Jerez. In the final standings, he ended an astonishing 122 points ahead of the next best Yamaha rider, Jack Miller, who finished 17th on the Pramac Yamaha. Across 22 rounds, Quartararo qualified inside the top 10 20 times, made Q2 at all but one event, and started from the front row 10 times, 6 of those on pole. His 3 Yamaha stablemates combined for just 1 front row start all year. He logged 10 top 10 finishes. Miller managed 5. Alex Rins and Miguel Oliveira had only 2 each. There were flashes of genuine brilliance, too. His podium ended a 29-race rostrum drought at Silverstone. A ride height device failure robbed him of another standout result, and he even snatched a famous pole position through sheer one-lap magic. As Paolo Pavieso admitted, the bike was only competitive in short bursts. Over 1 lap, it was fast, largely thanks to Fabio. In sprints, it improved, and in long races, it improved a little more. But the deeper the race went, the more the bike fell apart. In other words, whenever something meaningful could be extracted from the M1, he was the one extracting it. Yamaha knew this, which is why they offered him a massive contract, reportedly worth around 12 million euros, to keep him for 2025 and 2026. They reshaped their project around him. Max Bartolini arrived as technical director. Pramac joined forces with Yamaha, and most dramatically, a new V4 engine project was finally approved. On paper, it looked like Yamaha was finally matching the commitment of its superstar, but beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. The turning point was the V4 project and the looming 2027 regulation reset. Jack Miller tested the early V4 prototype at Valencia and walked away distinctly unimpressed. The engine felt underpowered, but worse, the electronics produced the acceleration issues that had plagued the old M1. Yamaha had gone conservative, evolution first, revolution later, and in today's MotoGP, that is a dangerous philosophy. For Fabio, this was the problem distilled into a single engineering decision. He's 26 years old, deep into what should be the prime of his career, and he's been blunt about his timeline. Yamaha knows 2026 is their final chance to convince him to stay. The Sepang test early that year is already seen as the make-or-break moment. If the V4 doesn't show clear potential, he could open talks with rival teams immediately. And that is where the relationship truly begins to fracture. Inside Yamaha, there's a growing belief that Quartararo's constant public criticism has distorted the M1's identity. His demands for more braking stability, more traction, and more drive pushed Yamaha towards characteristics they never naturally excelled in. Some within the factory feel they chased solutions that made the bike less Yamaha, and now, with the V4, they no longer want to follow his lead as closely. Reports suggest the factory is increasingly leaning on Andrea Dovizioso and Augusto Fernandez as reference points. Fernandez has done the majority of the V4 testing in both wildcards and private sessions, ironically, at Quartararo's own urging. But now, just as his patience runs thin, his influence on development is fading. Quartararo himself has been measured in his feedback. He says the V4 feels promising, and he has lapped quicker on it than the old inline-four, but he refuses to hype anything. The biggest problem is the one feeling he relied on more than anything else. Yamaha's legendary front-end confidence has gone missing. For a rider whose entire style was built on trust at corner entry, that is a major warning sign, and Yamaha appears increasingly tired of hearing about it. Paolo Pavieso has begun to push back publicly, saying he understands Fabio's frustration as a human being, but constant public criticism does not help the company's commitment. That last line matters. In Yamaha's eyes, there's a difference between a champion demanding more behind closed doors and a star rider regularly going to the media to hammer the project. They feel they have restructured the team, invested heavily in him, and committed to a radical V4 direction largely to keep him. They want him fully aligned with a long-term rebuild, not reminding the paddock how bad things still are. From Fabio's side, the argument is equally compelling. He can justifiably feel Yamaha has wasted 4 of his prime years. He turned down chances to join Ducati and RPA because he believed in Yamaha and believed in his own role as a factory-level talisman. He's made it clear he deserves a winning project, yet he has not stood on the top step of a Grand Prix podium since 2022, while riders who switch to Ducatis fight for titles almost immediately. Both sides are probably right, and that's what makes the situation so toxic. The 2027 rider market only raises the stakes. RPA has already held quiet discussions with Quartararo's camp, knowing Marco Bezzecchi and George Martin are both out of contract the same year. Honda and Ducati are monitoring the situation too. Some pundits, like Neil Hodgson, have suggested Quartararo should even consider a satellite Ducati seat with VR46 or Gresini, because the strongest package in the upcoming 856cc era will likely still come from Bologna. The twist is that Quartararo has softened on something he once considered non-negotiable, riding for a satellite team. Inspired by Marc Marquez ripping up his Honda contract, taking no base salary to join Gresini, and turning that gamble into a factory Ducati seat and a world title, Quartararo now sees the merit in a similar path. If Yamaha's V4 fails its 2026 audition, he's open to any route that gets him on a winning machine, factory or satellite, as long as the project has real potential. And right now, the one bike that doesn't clearly look like it can win in 2027 is the Yamaha. This is where the unthinkable becomes realistic for Yamaha. For years, letting Quartararo go would have seemed absurd. He's still a generational talent, the rider who almost single-handedly kept the Yamaha name relevant during its darkest stretch, and Yamaha's recent rider lineups illustrate how difficult elite talent has become for them.
In 2024, Quartararo was their unquestioned ace, but the depth behind him looked fragile. Rins never fully recovered from his 2023 leg injury. Miller was close to falling out of MotoGP entirely before the Pramac Yamaha project materialized. Oliveira had come to a stall at Satellite RPA. Even signing three-time WSBK champion Toprak Razgatlioglu felt like a now-or-never move. Yamaha believes he can adapt quickly, and his arrival has arguably given the factory the confidence to push back harder against Quartararo. But in terms of name value, nobody matches Fabio. So why would Yamaha even consider letting him go? Because sometimes losing your superstar is the only way to fix the project. Honda proved this accidentally. When they and Marquez split in 2023, it looked like a death spiral. Instead, the massive salary savings